How you doing? This book is entitled The Life of an American Jew in Racist Marxist Israel, and it's written by Jack Bernstein. It was written in 1984, I believe it was, and it's about 50 pages, so it shouldn't take you very long to read it all. You should read it in one sitting. I read it one afternoon. And what it does, it's, as the name implies, an American Jew goes to Israel and lives there and writes about his experiences there. And keep in mind that this is not called the life of a National Socialist in racist Marxist Israel, or the life of an Islamic fundamentalist in racist Marxist Israel. It's the life of an American Jew. So this is an insider's view of what life in Israel is actually like. And it's not written by someone who would have an axe to grind against the Jewish people or the Jewish state. It's written by an actual Jew, so it carries a little more weight than it would carry with if it was written by someone who could be easily labeled or discredited, or labeled as an anti-Semite. But mainly there's a couple of things that there's quite a few things that he points out, but I'm limited to 10 minutes. But the founding of Israel itself, and prior to the actual 1948 establishment of the State of Israel, there was the Stern Gang and the Irgun. These are terrorist organizations that a great many of Israel's prime ministers were members of. And coincidentally, the current White House Chief of Staff, Rahm Emanuel, his father was a member of one of these gangs, or one of these terrorist organizations. There was an incident called the Deir Yassin massacre, and also in the aftermath of that, after that, Menachem Begin praised the massacre itself. It was a terrorist act. He praised it and said, were it not for a military victory at Deir Yassin, there never would have been an Israel. And following that, they employed terrorism and intimidation to push the Arabs who were still there and didn't want to sell their land to the influx of European Jews that came there. They used these types of terrorist tactics to intimidate them and push them out so that the Jews can come in and settle and live where the Arabs were already inhabiting. One example of terrorism being a part of the founding of Israel. So if you ever run into someone who likes to talk trash about Yasser Arafat, right? Menachem Begin went on to become Prime Minister of Israel and also win the Nobel Peace Prize, as Yasser Arafat went on to become the chairman of the Palestinian Authority, and he won the Nobel Peace Prize. But oftentimes people want to detract from him and mention that he has a history in terrorism and so forth. The next time someone says that, ask them why the same amount of criticism isn't raised towards Menachem Begin, who was also a leader of a terrorist organization and also was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, and was also the head of the Israeli government. If they're going to launch criticism at one side for certain acts, then they should launch the same amount of criticism at the other side for similar acts. And as I said before, Menachem Begin isn't the only Israeli prime minister to have been involved in terrorism. Just about all of them have. But that's just one thing about Israel that we rarely hear about in the United States. Other things, the drug smuggling and the arms smuggling and so forth, the prostitution. It's a lot of organized crime, and I understand there's organized crime in every country, but the level of cooperation with the government that the organized crime has there is a lot worse than you would find in most nations, and especially nations that have been labeled as bastions of freedom and democracy, as Israel is made out to be. So, and also, the other thing is the amount of influence that Israel has over the United States, and I think this is obvious to pretty much everyone, but to hear it, what was said about it about a quarter century ago by an American Jew, and here's some, I actually want to read this. This is from page 22, and then it continues on page 40, I believe it is. This was talking about the war in 1973, where Israel was facing a couple of Arab nations, and the United States sent aid and funds and armament to Israel to help bail them out. It says Israel was saved, but so much U.S. military equipment was airlifted to Israel that the U.S. armed forces were left in short supply, and in a weakened position. The U.S. government was so much under Zionist influence that the U.S. Army's 82nd Airborne Division and U.S. troops stationed in Germany were alerted for possible deployment to aid Israel. It's pretty sad that United States government officials, to please the Zionist power in America, are willing to sacrifice the lives of American boys for Israel. Young men already in the U.S. Armed Forces should especially be concerned about Israeli precipitated wars and attempts to involve the U.S. in these wars. That's because the U.S. government will bow to the American Zionists and send American boys into combat. Those young men will have no choice but to fight for Israel. If American boys die in a future war, or future Middle East war, you'll know that those responsible will be the Jews of America and the weak-spined politicians in Washington who bow to their Zionist lords. And on page 31, the Marxist Zionists who rule Israel and the Marxist Zionists in America have been trying to trick the United States into a Middle East war on the side of Israel. If more Americans are not made aware of the truth about Israel, you can be sure that sooner or later these atheists who claim to be God's chosen people will trick the United States into a Middle East war against the Arabs, who in the past have been America's best friends. This was written in 1984, and all you have to do is look at the front page of any newspaper and you'll see that what he wrote about a quarter of a century ago is actually taking place right now. So, I mean, it's right here in black and white, and it's being played out. It's coming to fruition. It's already come to fruition. We invaded Iraq, occupied Saudi Arabia, invaded Iraq a second time, and I don't think anyone outside of maybe Sean Hannity still believes about the weapons of mass destruction or whatever the official reason was. And one last thing I want to leave you with. This is what he points out that people generally do whenever criticism is raised toward Israel or the Jewish community in general. First, you ignore the charges, hoping the information will not be given a widespread distribution. If the information starts reaching too many people, you ridicule the information and the persons giving it. If that doesn't work, your next step is character assassination. If the author or speaker hasn't been involved in scandal, you're adept in fabricating false charges. If none of these are effective, you are known to resort to physical attacks, but never do you try to prove the information wrong. We've seen that right here on YouTube. Of all the people who have actually made videos and spoken out against Jewish power in the Gentile world, how many actual well-thought-out video responses have you heard from the Jewish community to refute any of these arguments? Exactly. None. And you're not going to. They'll flag. They'll get you suspended. They'll put your name on a list so that you can be targeted. They'll attack your family. They'll do all sorts of stuff. But they'll never try to prove what you say wrong. And this is out of the mouth of an American Jew who lived in Israel. So, again, if what's being said about them is false, then it should be very easy to refute it. And the fact that they have made no effort to refute it, and instead have made every effort to silence those who point it out, should raise a red flag, and should cause people to look into it a little more closely and a little more critically than they have in the past. So with that, it's a pretty good book. I recommend everybody read it, and information on how to get it will be in the description box. Thanks for watching. A link to a copy of this book can be found in the sidebar.